Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepointe Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepointe helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
VMware or not to VMware? Are you tired of the discussion? I know I am, especially in the wake of their recently announced adjusted deadlines. Well, let's take it up a level. Before you can determine your long-term virtualization strategy, you need to start with the reason you have a virtualization strategy in the first place, which is to deliver business functionality. Why are we all so out of sorts about the changes at VMware? Well, because they have a real business impact. Understand the business impact, and honestly, you have your answer on your long-term strategy. That's really at the center of this episode of The Bridge. Over the course of 4 or 5 episodes, we've been touching on the Broadcom purchase of VMware and its effect on customers. And while I'm sure that we'll continue that dialogue to some extent, we've decided to capstone our almost weekly VMware discussions with our own Saad Saleem, cloud architect here at Bridgepointe. We simplify the actual reasons for price increases for customers and service providers alike. We dispel some myths and hyperbole, and ultimately settle back on where many of these discussions have to land, understanding the business impact of what's going on. If you enjoy your weekly chats about the business aspect of IT or impact of IT, and we're having some kind of impact on your business, please follow us. Click that subscribe button, give us 5 stars, show us some love, if you will. But let's get right to it. Here's my discussion with Bridgepointe's own Saad Saleem. Well, hi, and welcome to the Bridge Studios. I'm your host, Scott Kinka, and I've been looking forward to this one. Joining me today on the Bridge is a senior cloud architect, our senior cloud architect here at Bridgepointe, my friend Saad Saleem. Saad, how are you today?
I'm well, Scott. Good to be on.
And the reason we have Saad on is that this VMware discussion of late in the media has become somewhere around all-consuming. And, you know, we've had quite a bit of content on it, actually on the podcast, multiple episodes we've touched on it. And I figured it made some sense for us to do just a little bit of capstoning kind of on the topic, bring it back to a central point. We're going to do a brisk 25, 30 minutes here. So if you're looking for a kind of piece that just catch you up, whether you're a customer who hasn't made a decision yet, you're a partner or a service provider who's just trying to think about how to talk about it, you know, this is ultimately a little bit of a capstone project for us to sort of share our feelings on what's going on and give customers some good advice and a little bit of insight on what's going on out there in the field and what your peers are asking us for. So before we do that, though, you all might not know Saad. So let's do a little bit on that first. Saad, where are you calling us from?
Scott, I'm in the Bridgepointe home office in San Mateo, California.
Right there in Silicon Valley. You live local?
I do. I'm very, very close to the office.
How long have you been there?
Bridgepointe, 6.5 years now.
Yeah.
In the area since 91. So.
91. Where were you before that?
Pakistan, actually.
What's that?
In Pakistan.
Okay.
So, Dad was in the Air Force, so we got to travel all over the country, all over the world, almost. So lived in a few different places.
That's fantastic.
This is home now.
You've settled in Silicon Valley and you've been in Bridgepointe for some time. So we're thrilled to have you and super excited to get your insight. Tell us a little bit about your career journey, though, to get to Bridgepointe. I think it's relevant for this conversation.
Yeah, when you and I first met prior to Bridgepointe, I was at a private cloud provider in San Francisco. I was there for a few years, and prior to that, had various, primarily software as a service roles, ran IT, small companies, large companies, Oracle and Siebel. You probably heard those names, and then
Yeah,
Granicus
tiny
and
little
Upshot.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah. And Granicus and Upshot, well, Granicus is big now. They're in the government space, openness and transparency, and other SaaS service. And I started my career at a company called Upshot, which was head to head with Salesforce.com back in the days. We won more than Salesforce did, but they were in a lot more deals, and their marketing engine was just absolutely brilliant. Been doing this for a while.
Still is today, right?
Yep.
Now, well, so speaking of gigantic marketing engines and crazy hype cycles, there's just been a massive amount of conversation around what's going on with VMware since the Broadcom acquisition, and we've had all kinds of our partners and our customers sort of opining on this situation. Let's just take a step back for those who maybe haven't seen the other episodes and aren't following along at home. Can you just give us your version of what's occurred, just to catch everybody up? Broadcom acquired VMware, and then blank.
Yeah, I think Scott, Broadcom's doing the same thing Microsoft did. Broadcom's doing the same thing a lot of other major software companies have done. Is take their shiny product, make it cheaper and easier to support, easier to manage. We've seen and ensure recurring revenue. Microsoft is the biggest example of this. But if you look at the software world, right, everybody is tried at one point, especially those who are managing and supporting customers who run on-prem in uncontrolled environments. They've tried to lower their support costs and make it easier from a product perspective, from a labor perspective, to to manage their customers.
Mm-hmm.
Broadcom's doing exactly that. Customers are running all different versions of VMware. Uh, they call in direct support to Broadcom now, and they're streamlining it just like everybody else did. If you were running something on prem, it becomes really really hard to support. And frankly, if you look at Broadcom's stock price, they're really good at this. They've done this time and time again. And we, you had a podcast with AJ Kuftek from Expedient who was talking about the transformation within VMware and how Broadcom's enacting that. It's classic recurring shift to a recurring revenue model while lowering the cost to support it.
Got it. So, and we'll certainly any of those other assets that you reference, we'll make sure for our listeners are in the show notes for you to check out that conversation. And I agree with you. AJ did a good job just for the listeners at home on this particular episode. So that means, let me just read that back. Um, Perpetual license models of VMware everywhere, customers running it locally, service providers buying it perpetually and turning it into services that they're building for monthly. Broadcom comes in, simplifies 3,000 SKUs down to a small set and turns it into a recurring revenue license, whether you're running it in a cloud or running it, on your own infrastructure, right? Generally speaking, what has that meant really effectively to the customers that you've spoken to? Cost has gone up, cost has changed. Like, what are the challenges they're contending with?
Uh, Cost has impacted, but we're seeing different levels of impact. We've had tens to hundreds of conversations already around this with our customer base. And what we're seeing is some people are freaking out about a 15% increase, and there are others who are dealing with a 900% increase. And
Yeah.
it's not that VMware arbitrarily changed cost structures or SKU pricing for customers. They changed the model. You talked about this with AJ and with Dustin and others on previous episodes. The change is it's per core. There are minimums per core. There's no more per gig of RAM utilized. There's no more perpetual license. And that change in model is impacted people in different ways depending on what infrastructure they bought to support their applications and their private self-hosted, self-managed clouds.
Mm-hmm.
It's frankly had a significant impact on the smaller service providers, private clouds, cloud service providers, who a lot of them have been kicked out of the program, and they're now having to go upstream to one of the Pinnacle or Premier partners for VMware to get their licenses. And more importantly, from a Broadcom perspective, who do they call for support? They're calling service providers. So we're seeing customers get impacted both on I want to say at the enterprise level and at the service providers who support these small medium enterprises all over the world. And most of it is a licensing cost increase.
So let's break those into two categories real quick. I want to be a little bit specific, just in terms of realistically, if you're a customer right now who's bought it, and we're sort of equating it to what everybody's done. Clearly, you bought it perpetually. It looked one way on your balance sheet. It's now an OpEx monthly, of course, right? So that's your CFO is going to tell you what that means to you, right? At the end of the day. But in terms of the infrastructure side of the house, right? Going from a memory consumed model to a cores model is one big one. The second one that I've heard, and I would love you to talk a little bit about this, is how the bundle is, right? So you could buy VMware like Legos previously, right? Everybody's on an ESX host from the hypervisor perspective, but whether they're vSAN, whether they're vCloud Director, or whether they're using the various other layers of orchestration that VMware has, was really a matter of how big of a customer they are. Now they've got to sort of buy at least the foundations bundle that has more than just the hypervisor in it. Where are you seeing the big effect with your customers? Or is it really hard to answer that because it depends on what they're using? Is it in this perpetual change? Is it in the core versus process, or the memory versus proc change? Or is it in this bundling challenge?
I don't think the customers who are self-managed are getting impacted by the memory change. Right?
Okay.
CSPs are. The it's but you're dead on what feature are they using vSAN? Are they using NSX? Are there firewalls VMware?
Yeah.
What components that they layered on and now having to buy bundles? So it's changed what they have to pay for in order to get the same feature functionality from their stack. And so it's the variability on how the feature functionality that they're currently using into the bundled model is having different levels of impact for different customers.
Yeah. Depending on how far they are. So thus your difference on like, it could be 15% or it could be 900%. It depends
Absolutely.
on like, which Legos you bought, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the impact, right? There's certainly a technical impact on hypervisor and the tool you use to manage the hardware and the virtualization. But I think the real impact, and even for those customers who are not impacted 900%, it's a business impact. The
Yeah.
ROI for delivering said application to do a business function has now changed. And whether it's you just doubled or you went 500%, a customer whose cost went up 150%, that may be more significantly business impacting than somebody who had a larger increase because they had more margins or what have you, right? It's the business impact to people versus just a straight line item cost increase. That's what people are starting to, now that the initial reaction is we're getting past that. It's people are trying to assess how it impacts delivering business functionality, but delivering ROI. What is the cost of goods sold? How is that impacted? And what do they do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's double click on you made some comment about the service providers. I just want to clarify that statement. So what you said was, I was going through the multiple ways people could be seeing cost increase. And you said like the processor memory change, utilized memory versus processor change probably doesn't affect customers as much because, they're sort of buying and dedicating static stacks, if you will, to, single customer use, where service providers were playing kind of a little bit of the oversubscription game, right? So that's one challenge I love you to talk to. But the other one is this licensing one. So you mentioned that the smaller providers were quote unquote kicked out of the program. What it really, kind of amounts to was that VMware had a ton of partners that were service providers, and they said, we're going to focus on this smaller subset. What are the smaller providers do? I mean, they're not closing up shop around VMware. They're now transacting through the larger service providers to get licensing. Like, give me a little bit about the impact on the service providers, because, certainly as customers may be looking at this as, hey, I'm not running this locally, but I am running it through, this boutique service provider who I really like around VMware. Like, how is it affecting this smaller service providers in your mind?
Well, anybody that doesn't have 3,500 cores licensed isn't getting into the program. Right? They're not premier.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be 7,000 or 7,500 cores to be Pinnacle. So if you're not at at that level, then you have to go buy licenses from somebody else. And you use the term closing up shop. I think some of them are having those conversations. Should we sell the business to somebody else because we can't really afford to continue to support? It's about cost of goods sold. It's about the same decision making that every technology and business leader at the enterprise level is having to make. Does this tool make sense? Same thing with the CSPs. So we've had a number of conversations with CSPs and directed them and helped them navigate where do they get the licenses from? Who can provide them with first level support? Because VMware isn't taking that call anymore.
Yeah. It's funny. I've seen some of our partners who are Premier and Pinnacle advertising to other service providers, basically going and saying, hey, let us be your, the partner a stage above you, in between VMware, which is super interesting. So all of this leads you to believe, I mean, we talked about the closing up shop thing. And certainly if you're we haven't seen any evidence of that necessarily per se, where we've had a partner come to us, a supplier partner of us come to us and say, hey, we're going to stop doing VMware yet. And we may yet, but I do think it brings up an interesting question, right? Which is if you, whether you're an internal IT shop or a service provider, and you are VMware centric, is this the right time? And we've had some of these conversations to be thinking about something else, right? It's obviously a lock-in scenario. Even though VMware's been sold 3 times and there hasn't been an effect, this is the first time it really means something, right? Where it's changing, but it is changing. So talk a little bit about, are customers asking you, let me phrase it a different way. Are customers asking you if they should just be getting away from VMware at this point?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think the first reaction was exactly that. What's an alternative to VMware? And there's a ton of alternatives. You go back to any of the recent podcasts you've done, right? Everybody brings up KVM and Proxmox, and Nutanix comes up, and Hyper-V, and so on and so forth. That was the initial reaction. How do I get off of this lock-in where 85% of the market is using VMware for hypervisor? But I think that's passing now, right? You can take one piece of software and replace it with another piece of software. Companies do ERP transformations and other CRM transformations all the time. It's not easy. It's very, very impactful to the people who use that software, and in this case, to the IT people who manage. Right? Are there alternatives? Yes. Are they viable? They can be, depending on the skill set of the people that you have on staff. I think what's this forcing people, where the conversation is evolving, Scott, and I think you're seeing this in a lot of the conversations you've had, both internally and on the podcast. People are talking about, how do I deliver said applications? And more importantly, how do I deliver said functionality to the business? And whether that makes sense to keep leveraging VMware. Part of what this is doing is technology leaders and business leaders are starting to ask, hey, we didn't do the cloud transformation. We didn't get on the cloud journey before because we were a CapEx model and the ROI made sense to continue to deliver it in said model. Is the cost increase or the change, and more to the point, I think the uncertainty around how these changes impact the business Should we be in a more agnostic model? Should we change our service delivery? Should we reevaluate things that we said were too expensive or too difficult to transform into? Dustin Young from Enzu talked about it in your
Yeah,
last
he
podcast, right?
did.
It's transformation. It's do you do is this the right time to do away with the vendor lock-in and put yourself on a journey where delivering you're delivering business functionality to the stakeholders? Does that mean you have to transition to AWS? Well, that's vendor lock-in too, right?
Yeah.
Or do you go more agnostic, something like containerization? Well,
Hmm.
it's not a push button change. You have to evaluate, you have to figure out which applications can. SaaS. SaaS has been around. I worked for one of the first SaaS companies in the model we were called an ASP back in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
And, and SaaS is out there for just about every critical business function. Do you reevaluate SaaS now? It so what
Yeah, so not
this
even necessarily just a question about moving an existing workload, but is it time, rather than trying to transform the workload, just transform the application or begin to move into a scenario where you're buying it by the drink as opposed to running the software?
do you want to run the infrastructure in addition to the application, or do you want the experts to do it for you, the software
Yeah.
experts? Do you need infrastructure, or do you need the feature functionality that the software delivers? And I think that's the thing that our customers, we hear this all the time as the conversation is going upstream within the business, from the system admins to the CIOs to the CFOs and the C suite. How do we deliver this? Is it, are we as me as the IT director the right person to deliver security as a service?
Yeah.
Are we staffed enough to deliver 24 by 7 monitoring, management, and so on and so forth? Or are there experts out there that we can leverage? And that's the decision I think this is evolving into. And Broadcom's really almost doing a service to IT people, where businesses can now relook at how they deliver business functionality.
Hmm.
The tool change, the tool change is an option, but it's really not. We're the stream that we're seeing from customers. First was a reaction, what's the alternative to VMware? And now it's, how do we get in let's deal with the immediate impact of license renewals and so on and so forth. And then go back and systematically look at what are we delivering? How are we delivering it? What are the options to deliver that said software functionality, business functionality? And then what is the journey to transform?
Hmm.
We've got, as you know, we've developed this 4-step process that, hey, if we need to help you with your licenses were impacted at 900%, can we leverage one of our pinnacle partners or premier partners to get you licenses, or even advise you to go do a short-term renewal with VMware? Give yourself a year, 2 years to do a thoughtful analysis on everything. We've got so many amazing partners on that can help evaluate. I've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And then decide what's the right strategy for you. We're, the all in went away a few years ago, right? It's a hybrid model. Even customers who are doing everything on in house are leveraging SaaS applications. So
Yep.
some applications are SaaS, some applications are running out of AWS, Azure, GCP. I'm sure there are people running in IBM Cloud too, right? And regional clouds and smaller clouds, private clouds. How is does how does that combination of available delivery models, available cloud models, how do I deliver BI? How do I deliver AI? Do
Yeah.
I build all that infrastructure?
Can I just, I want to jump back into one topic you mentioned there. I don't want to miss it in the middle there because you mentioned people. Um, You also mentioned earlier, I think I forget the number that you exact number you used, something like 80 to 85% of workloads out there are sitting in VMware, which means 80 to 85% of the people who are administrating them are VMware trained, right? What are the people implications, maybe even less at the corporate level and sort of more at the admin level, as this market continues to change? I mean, if I'm an IT director, but my legacy is in VMware administration, that's where my experience is. What would be your advice for me?
That's a great question, Scott. I'll use an example. When I was running IT for a company, we had a small team. We had a administrator whose job was to make sure the application ran well. Right? And Jason was absolutely fantastic at it. If I decided to, oh, VMware was going to cost too much and we're going to move to something else, Jason would have to relearn something, go away from delivering applications, which is 24 by 7, real customer impacting. I mean, we're talking about the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives leveraging that technology. And then the team having to relearn something, I'm now taking away from what they should be doing and what they're really, really good at to change the tool, which now everybody's distracted. I may save a couple of dollars here and there on licensing, but I'm going to lose a whole lot more from a function, from a time perspective, from a labor perspective, and certainly from now I've taken somebody out of their comfort zone into from delivering applications to dealing with infrastructure. Those are the kind of situations where resumes get posted on LinkedIn and status
Yeah.
issues, right? It's a real. I think there's a threat to people who are just wholesale saying, "I'm going to move off of the platform." It's not the hypervisor. The hypervisor is easy. It's the it's it's the tools around it that manage it. It's the ability to those tools. vCenter. You could have 20 different deployments in 20 different data centers or locations, and you have a central management tool that you can move your vMotioning stuff. That the vMotion has become part of the lexicon. It's a very, very VMware centric
Hmm.
functionality. How do you have the ability? Can you understand what the how much does it cost to change, right? And
Yeah.
how much does it cost and impact people like Jason, like others? Every team has those superstars especially in IT, where IT isn't known to be overstaffed. Right?
Yeah.
IT is known to have barely enough, and the only time you get noticed is when something goes wrong and somebody pulls. It's acts of individual heroism.
Can-
You're
Speak of
creating that by
acts of,
changing the tools.
yeah, I hear you. Well, speaking of acts of individual heroism, let's just take your heroism up a notch because we're running out of time here. I want to make sure we get it's time for some fun questions. At a headline, um, I think I heard you say in the middle of this, you know, and it's not your recommendation in every case, certainly, because every case will be different. But at a super high level, figure out how to manage and stave costs off in the short term with creative buying or interim steps while you have an opportunity to just reconsider the workloads over time, not just in terms of changing out the tool, but really in terms of how you want to service
Yeah,
that data and that workload from front to back. That's really the process that, as you're getting asked questions from customers, that you're walking them through. Fair statement?
absolutely fair statement.
Okay.
Absolutely
Awesome.
fair statement. It's an opportunity to look at how you deliver hardware. Hardware became the virtualized hardware became ubiquitous, commoditized with AWS, Azure,
Hmm.
Rackspace, IBM. Everybody's been doing private clouds and public cloud for a while now.
Yeah.
it was the argument against using available compute, available hardware was cost.
Yeah.
CapEx was easier to digest. You divide it by 36 or 60, it was easier to digest. Is it
Yep.
still the same? How
Yep.
and customers are, as we're getting past the conversation of they just increased my price, I'm going to change this over. I'm going to change the tool that's increasing my price to, am I going to get into another vendor lock-in?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to find the right mix? And those are our conversations with customers. Where can we leverage database as a service? Where can we leverage AI as a service? Where can we leverage CRM as a service? And where do we absolutely need to run our own infrastructure? And where we do need to run our own infrastructure, should we run the hardware and the virtualization, or should we leverage somebody like AJ Kuftek at
Yeah.
Expedient, Enzu, 1111, Rackspace? There are so many service providers out there who can deliver the hardware as a service with the right compliance and industry vertical expertise to be able to deliver that set application that you have to have hardware for, that you can't run in AWS, Azure, GCP, or what have
Yep.
you.
Completely. Makes sense. Saad, great chat. I appreciate the time. And for anyone who found this interesting, obviously Saad and team are available to help out on your projects, and we would love to engage with you out there in the field. Saad, I want to have 3 fun questions with you real quick before we let you go and get back to what is obviously a brisk afternoon of meetings, I'm sure. That will all sound very much like this conversation, more than likely. Okay, first one, maybe not as fun. What are you reading right now? Is there something? Could be business, could be fiction. What's on your end table?
I'm rereading a book called The Prize. It's
Okay,
about the history of the oil industry, how it started, I think the oil industry and reading about the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of England sort of gives you context around how things, one perspective on how things really work. So
yeah,
I love reading about history, and that's The Prize was one of the first books. It's a thick book. It was one of the first ones to kind of read in a perspective on, yeah, this is how things happen.
got it. Super light reading. It sounds like
Super light.
really, it's a super light reading. All right, that's one. Number two would be I'm not sure which one we want to go with first. All right, give me a shameless prediction for the next 12 to 18 months. Doesn't need to be business or technology related, but if you like it, can be. I don't care if it's sports. We try to stay away from politics, but if you want to jump in on that grenade, that's fine too. Whatever you like.
If Tiger can walk, he'll win another major.
Okay, I like that one. Well prepped, and we'll be able to look back on that one very easily and see how right you are. Last one, the zombie apocalypse happens, or AI comes to take over the world, whatever that is. And in this dystopian future, you have only one app functioning on your mobile phone. You get to choose. Which one is
It'll be the signal. If
it?
the zombie apocalypse happens, we are probably all IT strategists and trying to monetize the 3.5 trillion a year being spent on just services, UCaaS, CCaaS, and cloud services.
Got it. For
It's
those of you who
dragging
aren't aware, the
stagger.
signal, if you're on the customer side, if you're an end customer, this signal is our repository of information, and effectively our operating system for our strategists and engineering and architecture teams out in the field. Saad, great brisk conversation. I appreciate the time today. Great job. Love seeing you. Love chatting with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your sunny day out there in San Mateo, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Scott.
You got it. And for those of you who are listening at home, thanks for staying with us. And we look forward to bringing you more good information like this on another episode of The Bridge. Listen, If you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointetechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.